Miss Scarlett, where are you going without your shawl and the night air fixed to set in? Ask me no questions and I'll tell you no lies.
9. The Hattie McDaniel.
I sincerely hope I shall always be a credit to my race and to the motion picture industry. My heart is too full to tell you just how I feel.
And you, Mrs. Hamilton, I know just how much that means to you.
Remember Clark Gable? One of Hollywood's biggest stars, he played the famous role of Rhett Butler in the 1939 movie. But what many folks don't know is that he kept a secret hidden while filming the movie Gone with the Wind.
No, I don't think I will kiss you. Although you need kissing badly. That's what's wrong with you. You should be kissed and off.
What could someone so famous possibly want to hide? Now, Clark Gable had a close friendship with Hattie McDaniel, who made history as the first black person to win an Academy Award. He even threatened to skip the film's premiere because she wasn't allowed to attend due to segregation. Did this strong bond between Gable and McDaniel suggest there was more to their relationship than people thought? What was really happening behind the scenes? Let's explore the story of Clark Gable's hidden truth during the filming of Gone with the Wind, and how his friendship with Hattie McDaniel played a role in this mystery.
That I present the Academy Award for the best performance of an actress in supporting roles during 1939 to Hattie McDaniel.
On February 29, 1940, Hattie McDaniel made history as the first black person to win an Academy Award for her unforgettable performance as Mammy in the iconic film Gone with the Wind. Standing before a sea of her white peers at the prestigious Coconut Grove, her face was filled with pride, joy, and the weight of what it meant to break such significant racial barriers in Hollywood. With tears in her eyes, she delivered a heartfelt speech saying, "I sincerely hope that I shall always be a credit to my race in the motion picture industry. My heart is too full to tell you how I feel."
I sincerely hope I shall always be a credit to my race and to the motion picture industry. My heart is too full to tell you just how I feel.
But McDaniel's journey to success wasn't easy. It was a constant battle where she faced racial discrimination, scandals, and personal tragedies that eventually wore her down, contributing to her premature death. To understand Hattie McDaniel's journey, it's important to look at her early life and the experiences that shaped her into the strong, resilient woman she became. Born on June 10, 1893, in Wichita, Kansas, Hattie came from a family of formerly enslaved parents who continued to struggle long after gaining their freedom. Before Hattie was born, her family had already endured tragedy after tragedy. Her mother, Susan, gave birth to 13 children, but only 7 survived, with Hattie being the youngest. Even with those losses, survival was a constant challenge for the family as they lived in extreme poverty. Hattie herself was severely malnourished at birth, weighing just over 3 pounds. Despite these hardships, Hattie showed early signs of her future stardom. From a young age, she had a natural talent for singing and dancing, which she loved to showcase. Her performances were so captivating that her mother would sometimes give her a nickel just to stop. Even though the McDaniel family struggled financially, Hattie was determined to make a name for herself. In 1914, she made a decision that would forever alter the course of her life. She joined her brother Otis McDaniel's minstrel show, which marked the beginning of her career in entertainment. Hattie didn't stop there. Alongside her sister, she launched the McDaniel Sisters Company, an all-female minstrel show, something practically unheard of at the time. This might sound like a small step, but it was the beginning of something big. Hattie had an amazing presence on stage, combining grace with strength, and she knew how to use that to her advantage. Over the years, she continued to develop her skills, perfecting a persona that would eventually resemble her most famous character, Mammy.
You've been brave so long, Miss Scarlett. You just gotta go on being brave.
However, the road to success wasn't smooth. In 1916, Hattie's brother Otis passed away, leaving her troupe broke and struggling. Desperate for work, Hattie took whatever roles she could find, including small radio gigs. She even became one of the first African-American women to sing on the radio when she performed with Professor George Morrison's orchestra in Denver, Colorado. It was tough going for a while until something unexpected happened that knocked her right back down. In 1929, Hattie McDaniel's life took a sharp and terrifying turn for the worse when the stock market crash of the Great Depression wiped out what was shaping up to be a promising entertainment career. At the time, she was working on the road with Florenz Ziegfeld's tour of Showboat, a big deal for any performer. But when the financial crisis hit, the show couldn't afford to keep most of its cast. And like many others, Hattie was left without a job. To make matters worse, the production didn't have enough money to send its performers back home. So there she was, stranded in Milwaukee with no money and no idea what to do next. Hattie's situation was desperate, and she had to make a heartbreaking decision to survive. Swallowing her pride and incredible talent, she took a job as a bathroom attendant at Club Madrid, a local nightclub. It wasn't glamorous work by any means, but it was a paycheck. And at that moment, that was all that mattered. While cleaning stalls and waiting for another opportunity, Hattie clung to the hope that her chance to shine would come. That opportunity finally arrived one night when all the other singers at the club had left, and the management needed one more act to close the show. Without hesitation, Hattie jumped at the chance and took the stage, belting out a powerful rendition of St. Louis blues. The crowd went wild, cheering her on, and even her co-workers couldn't contain their excitement. Her performance was so impressive that the club's boss immediately offered her a spot as a regular act. It was a game-changing moment, but little did Hattie know, it was just the beginning of her roller coaster journey to fame. Fast forward 2 years, and just when things were looking up, the Great Depression hit harder, forcing Club Madrid to close its doors. But this time, Hattie was prepared. She had learned from her past struggles and had managed to save up enough money to make her next big move. She packed her bags and set her sights on Hollywood, convinced that the booming film industry needed someone with her talent. However, when she arrived in Los Angeles, reality hit hard. The only roles she could land were those of sassy maids, and her most notable work was on the radio as Hi-Hat Hattie. Even though she had a knack for these parts, the pay was abysmal, barely enough to keep her afloat. Determined to make it work, Hattie took on real-life maid jobs to supplement her income. It was a tough and humbling experience, but Hattie never lost sight of her ultimate goal. She knew these difficult times were paving the way for something bigger, and her persistence would soon pay off in a major way. By 1937, Hollywood was buzzing with anticipation over the casting of producer David O. Selznick's much-anticipated film, Gone with the Wind. It was the movie everyone wanted to be part of. White actresses dreamed of landing the coveted role of Scarlett O'Hara, and every black woman in Hollywood was eyeing the chance to play Mammy, the loyal maid. The competition was fierce, and Hattie found herself up against some major contenders, including none other than First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt's own maid, Elizabeth McDuffie. Eleanor herself was said to be pulling strings behind the scenes to help McDuffie land the role. But Hattie wasn't the type to back down from a challenge. She had a few tricks up her sleeve, thanks to years of experience in show business and a network of powerful allies. Some say Clark Gable, who had already secured the role of Rhett Butler, put in a good word for her. Others claim that Hattie's brother Sam reached out to his friend Bing Crosby to nudge Selznick in her favor. But perhaps the boldest move of all came during Hattie's audition. In a calculated act of showmanship, she walked in wearing a real maid's uniform, making a clear statement that she was the perfect fit for the role. That audition sealed the deal, and Hattie secured the iconic role of Mammy. However, while this breakthrough would go down in history as a career-defining moment, it was only the beginning of a new set of struggles for Hattie. Landing the role of Mammy in Gone with the Wind was like a dream come true for Hattie McDaniel. It was her first real break in Hollywood, and she must have been over the moon about it.
Miss Carter, come on in the house. Come on in before you catch your death.
But not long after that, reality hit her hard. Many black activists were far from happy with her choice of roles, mainly because she was constantly cast as a servant.
Pinnacle of her career triggered a storm of controversy about the character of Mammy. It engulfed Hattie's life in ways she never expected.
They felt like she wasn't doing enough to push the narrative that black actors could play more than just maids and butlers. But Hattie had a sharp response for her critics. She famously said, "I can be a maid for $7 a week, or I can play a maid for $700 a week." she definitely had a point, but still the criticism must have stung, especially when she was just trying to make her way in a tough, segregated industry. After filming for Gone with the Wind wrapped up, producer David O. Selznick realized something huge. It wasn't just the grandeur of the film or the star-studded cast that was about to make waves. It was Hattie McDaniel's unforgettable portrayal of Mammy. She had stolen the show, outshining even the film's leads, Clark Gable and Vivian Leigh. While this should have been a good thing for Hattie, it soon turned into a bittersweet moment. The film's grand premiere was set to take place in Atlanta, but there was a huge problem: Georgia's strict segregation laws. The state didn't want any of the black actors from the movie attending the premiere. Selznick tried to negotiate an exception for Hattie, but the studio wasn't having it. They refused to back him up. Despite this, Hattie had some powerful friends in Hollywood. One of them was Clark Gable, her co-star. When he found out that Hattie wouldn't be allowed to attend her own premiere, he was furious and reportedly even considered boycotting the event in protest. But Hattie, not wanting to stir up more drama, convinced him to go without her. Still, her absence didn't go unnoticed. Margaret Mitchell, the author of Gone with the Wind, sent Hattie a heartfelt telegram, apologizing that she couldn't be there to hear the applause she so rightfully deserved. Though Hattie missed the Atlanta premiere, she finally had her moment to shine when the film debuted in Hollywood on December 28, 1939. This time, her face was front and center in the program, and she was right there with the rest of the cast. But things were about to get even better. After the movie's release, Hattie received an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress. This was groundbreaking. She was the first black person ever to be nominated for an Oscar. It was a massive deal. Fast forward to Oscar night in 1940. Hattie walks into the venue and jaws hit the floor. She looked like a real-life Cinderella, all dolled up with her hair adorned in gardenias and wearing a gown fit for royalty. And then the moment came. The announcement for Best Supporting Actress. When they called her name, Hattie McDaniel made history, becoming the first black actor to win an Oscar.
9, to Hattie McDaniel.
She took the stage with tears in her eyes and gave a heartfelt speech, expressing her gratitude and hope for the future. It must have been an incredibly overwhelming moment, knowing the barriers she had just broken through.
I sincerely hope I shall always be a credit to my race and to the motion picture industry. My heart is too full to tell you just how I feel.
But despite the glamour of the night, the reality was still harsh. The Coconut Grove, where the ceremony was held, had a strict no blacks policy, and they only made an exception for Hattie as a favor. And even then, they segregated her from the rest of the Gone with the Wind cast and crew, forcing her to sit at a separate table with only her white agent by her side.
Let her in the theater until right before she got that award, someone came outside and brought her into the auditorium. She wasn't even allowed to sit in there.
And if you thought things couldn't get worse, imagine this. After the Oscar ceremony, Hattie's so-called friends decided to hit up a No Blacks Allowed club for the after party, leaving her out in the cold with her shiny new Oscar in hand. Despite her massive success on screen, Hattie's off-screen reality was a relentless battle against racism and prejudice. The struggles didn't end at Hollywood's doorstep.
Knock on my door. You done it before.
In 1942, Hattie made a bold move that shocked everyone. She bought herself a lavish 17-room mansion in Sugar Hill, a swanky neighborhood known as the Black Beverly Hills. You'd think people would applaud her success, but instead, her wealthy white neighbors weren't too thrilled about it. They started complaining that having a black woman like Hattie in the neighborhood would tank their property values and ruin the area's exclusivity. But Hattie wasn't the type to roll over. In true Hattie McDaniel fashion, she took them to court, fought back and won, proving that she had every right to live wherever she pleased. She didn't do it alone either. She rallied support from powerful friends like Ethel Waters and Louise Beavers to stand up against the discriminatory attitudes of the time. According to her biographer Jill Watts, Hattie's victory was much more than just a personal win. It was a significant step towards dismantling housing segregation across the U.S. But even with all the hardships and prejudice she faced, Hattie did have one true ally who stood by her through thick and thin: Clark Gable. Hattie and Gable were incredibly close, so much so that rumors started to swirl, with people speculating that there was something more than just friendship between them. But what was the real story behind their bond? While we may never know all the details, what's clear is that Clark Gable had Hattie's back during some of the toughest moments of her career. He famously threatened to boycott the premiere of Gone with the Wind when he found out that Hattie wouldn't be allowed to attend. He ultimately showed up at her insistence, but that gesture alone spoke volumes about how much he valued her. Their friendship was evident even in their on-set antics, like the time Gable swapped out iced tea for real brandy while filming a scene and watched Hattie take a big sip, likely laughing together afterward. Their bond lasted a lifetime, transcending the racial barriers that divided so much of the industry at the time. Gable deeply respected Hattie's talent, and she appreciated his willingness to challenge the status quo, especially when it came to how she was treated. But while Hattie found a loyal friend in Clark Gable, finding love in her personal life proved to be far more challenging. Her love life was filled with heartbreak and disappointment. Hattie had jumped into the world of romance at a young age, marrying for the first time when she was just 18. In 1911, she wed Howard Hickman, but that marriage ended in tragedy when Hickman passed away only 4 years later, leaving Hattie a widow while she was still so young. Even though she was devastated, Hattie didn't give up on love. In 1922, she married George Langford, hoping for a fresh start, but this marriage also ended in sorrow when George died from a gunshot wound. It was another crushing blow just as Hattie's career was beginning to take off. Throughout the 1930s, she focused on her work and her rise to stardom. But even with her focus on her career, Hattie never gave up on the idea of finding a lasting love. Finally, in the 1940s, she met James Lloyd Crawford, a real estate agent, and they tied the knot in 1941. This time, Hattie hoped to start a family. And in 1945, she revealed some exciting news. At 51 years old, she was pregnant. Hattie was thrilled and spared no expense, preparing for the arrival of her baby by buying clothes and setting up a nursery. But as time went by, something didn't feel right. Weeks passed, and there were no signs of the baby. Hattie's worst fears were confirmed when doctors told her that she had experienced a rare condition known as a false pregnancy. It shattered her world. She had been preparing to welcome a child into her life, only to be hit with the devastating truth that there was no baby at all. The emotional toll was heavy. After coming to terms with this heartbreaking loss, Hattie fell into a deep depression, and her marriage to James started to crumble. She tore down the nursery she had so lovingly set up and eventually ended her relationship with James. But as with so much of Hattie's life, there was more to this story than meets the eye. Hattie later revealed that the strain on her marriage to James Lloyd Crawford wasn't just about the lost baby. The truth was, James couldn't handle her rising success, and it put a serious strain on their relationship. Despite the heartache, Hattie did what she always did. She threw herself into her work. She landed a major role on the hit radio show Beulah, but her love life took yet another hit.
The Beulah Show. Everybody says I'm a girl that knows all the answers. The only trouble is, no one ever asked me the question.
In 1949, Hattie met Larry Williams, an interior designer, and they quickly rushed into marriage in June, hoping that this time things would finally work out. On the surface, it seemed like she had everything lined up: a hit show, money coming in, and a new man by her side. But just 5 months later, things started falling apart. Hattie filed for divorce, and the breakup quickly turned messy. In court, she admitted that their time together was full of constant arguing and fighting, and that wasn't even the worst part. Rumors started swirling around Hollywood that the couple's fights weren't just verbal. They reportedly had physical altercations. The stress took a huge toll on Hattie's mental and physical health. She lost her appetite, and within just 2 weeks, she had dropped 12 pounds. But the emotional weight Larry put on her was even worse. Despite Larry having a successful business of his own, he had a bad habit of spending Hattie's money. At one point, he even had the nerve to ask her to fund a trip to Europe. Hattie wasn't having any of it. In true Hattie style, she sarcastically offered him $50 for a bus ticket to Europe, Pennsylvania instead. But Larry wasn't so easy to shake. He didn't just want money, he also wanted to manage Hattie's career and insisted on having a joint bank account. Hattie saw right through him and made it clear that no man was going to take control of her finances. The final straw came when Larry tried to sabotage her career, creating drama with her castmates on Beulah and doing everything he could to drag her down. Hattie admitted that he had made her life miserable, saying, "I couldn't even sleep. I couldn't focus on my lines." It was a dark period for her, full of heartache and hardship. Sadly, Hattie struck out 4 times in marriage, and after her split from Larry, she never got another shot at finding true love. Toward the end of her life, Hattie faced even more challenges. In the 1950s, things seemed to be looking up, but it turned out to be the calm before the storm. After filming a few episodes for her TV series Beulah, Hattie began to feel ill and went to the doctor. The news she received was devastating. She had cancer, and there wasn't much that could be done. In 1952, at the age of 59, Hattie McDaniel lost her battle with the illness. Before she passed away, Hattie had one last wish. She wanted to be buried in a white casket, wearing a white shroud, with white gardenias in her hair and hands, and covered with a white gardenia blanket. The gardenias had special significance for Hattie. She had worn them in her hair and on her dress the night she won her Academy Award. It was one of the biggest moments of her life, and she wanted to honor it even in death. Her estate did their best to fulfill her wishes, but there was one thing they couldn't control. Hattie had requested to be buried in the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, but because it was still segregated at the time, they refused. Instead, she was laid to rest at her second choice, Rosedale Cemetery. In her will, Hattie also left her Oscar plaque to Howard University, a historically black college in Washington, D.C. But even this gesture wasn't without drama. First, the IRS claimed her Oscar due to debts she owed. When it finally made its way to Howard, the plaque mysteriously disappeared sometime in the 1960s or 1970s. To this day, no one knows where it is. Even with all the hardships she faced, Hattie left behind one last joke. Despite the bitter end to her marriage with Larry Williams, she found a way to get the last laugh. In her will, she left Larry something to remember her by, a grand total of $1. It was her final parting shot at the man who had caused her so much pain. Hattie McDaniel's death was a huge loss, and thousands of fans, friends, and mourners gathered to pay their respects at her funeral. Her legacy remains an inspiring testament to strength, perseverance, and breaking barriers in a world stacked against her. Hattie McDaniel will always be remembered for her incredible impact on the entertainment industry and the path she paved for future generations.